All right, recording is started. Welcome to SIG Windows. It is June 28th, 2022, and this is our regular SIG Windows meeting. And we follow the CNCF Code of Conduct. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Otherwise, we can get started here. I don't know if we have too many announcements. Were frozen last week, and so we've gotten into coding, and I think it's early August. I have to look up the dates for the code freeze. So we've got a few weeks here to get the work done. Does anybody have any announcements that they would like to share with the group? No? Okay. Is there anybody on the call who's new to the group and would like to introduce themselves? Taking a look, I don't see. I think I notice I think I recognize everybody. So, is there anybody there? Oh, okay, great. Marius has been working on some of the perf dashboard work. And so I've asked him to just do a quick demo and show off some of the work he's been working on for the last couple months. For folks who aren't familiar, there's a perf test repository that contains a suite of tests that can run against the cluster and then collect metrics from Prometheus and then display those metrics in a dashboard that then you can see graphs and things. And the goal for SIG Windows, this release, was to get that dashboard showing up and so that we can begin to track and maybe understand a little bit more about the performance of our code and see if there's any regressions and those types of things. And so Marius has been leading that work, and I'll hand it over to him.
Hello, everyone. So I cannot share screen while you are sharing, James. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I've been working on this issue to add soap tests for Windows jobs. And the goal is to collect metrics regarding memory usage, no storage, open file handles, orphan processes, and network port allocations. There was some work that had to be done in the perf test repo. This periodic job is running against the working progress branch on my fork. It should soon be released into the perf dash, which is this. Just having to get in touch with the infra team to get it deployed. So I can show you a local deployment that I have using the job config from SIG Windows. So it's fetching this job, and it will expose the metrics in this dashboard. Here you can select the metrics that we are interested in, and we can see the graph for each build that has run. Currently, it's running daily. We can see the CPU usage for every process that it's running during the test. We can see memory usage, the same for every process that it's running. We can see the network traffic for the interfaces that are running on the Windows nodes. And we can see the total storage used for each of the hard drives that are attached to the Windows node. There are a lot of them here because on the way Windows is handling the disks with the host process containers. And we can also see the open file handles. And yeah, it's collecting the metrics from this file, and then there is a job that you set some tags regarding the perf dashboard, where do you want them to be displayed, and eventually they will be displayed here as a Windows soak test.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It's great to be able to see kind of the various processes and what's going on there. Anybody have any questions?
I'm surprised that they're all passing with no flakes. Like, what's that all about? Like, did you remove the flakes or you just don't have any?
It's running against Kubernetes version 1.24, I think. So it's not running against the master.
1.24. Okay. But even then, 1.24 looks pretty stable. I didn't think it would be that stable. It's nice.
So this doesn't
been
run
running for 10 days.
Okay.
And this doesn't run the whole suite, like conformance test suite. This is a very specific set of pods. Is that right?
Yep, it's running the how is it called? The here in cluster.
Yeah, I mean,
loader, you
I
can
just would
select
assume
which.
I would assume that cluster loader would have things that flaked on Windows. That's what I'm surprised about. I mean, I feel like, Marius, we need to add tests if nothing is flaking, because we all know Windows is flaky, right? So we need to, there must be some tests that, are we running all the tests, or should we add some new ones?
No, we are running this test from this config file. Those are the Windows tests for cluster loader. So it's just measuring the resource usage, and it's starting some latency pods and some polls images, and then it's trying to when it runs this, it actually gathers all the metrics from I have to go back.
Yeah, it scrapes them with the, it's scraping them from the, it's running the node agent. Do we have like, do we have tests that, like, I guess, do we have issues filed for tests that we don't have in cluster loader that do exist in Linux? Like, do we have a service endpoint density test? Because I guarantee that would that would probably give us a few red boxes.
Yes, I noticed that when you increase the pod count for the test, it's getting failures because there are not enough resources to schedule more than, I don't know, 60 pods or 40 pods per node. And currently, the way this test is configured, it's supporting only one node cluster.
Oh, okay. I mean, this is really cool that we have this in place. Like, we now have a regression signal for the performance tests. And now, you know what we can do, which is cool, is we can start adding new performance tests that actually break the things that we know we want to improve. and then we can see that regression signal change over time. This is really cool.
The other thing that Marius did here was he took the perf loader was using Windows Exporter, but it was installing it directly on the node. And so he took the new Windows Exporter host process container and integrated it into perf dash. And so now that's all working with the host process containers and Windows Exporter, which is really cool.
Yep. So previously it was a pretty hacky job on how to install Windows Exporter on the Windows nodes. It was using the Google Cloud to SSH into the nodes and install the WMI exporter directly on the host. And then we updated this test to use host process containers, and we deploy it with a manifest.
Cool. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Anything anybody wants to see? As Jay pointed out, this is kind of the initial work to get this all flowing and working together, but definitely improvements.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Do you have a Marius, do you have like a backlog of issues filed in Cluster Loader that people can help with if they want to help you with this to add more tests that we might want? Or are you still working on the nuts and bolts and you haven't really carved that out yet?
No, I just managed to get most of the PRs merged because as James mentioned, we needed to do some changes on the way the Windows Exporter was deployed, and we had some issues with some persistent volumes from the Prometheus service that they were specific for Google. So I've been working mostly on getting this to
just getting it
work.
working. What do you think we
Yeah.
need to do? How much stuff do you think we need to do next until we can maybe onboard some new engineers that don't know as much as you do about this to help you out with stuff?
So at the moment, I think it's pretty stable, as in most of the jobs run successfully. So we can focus more on adding more tests here.
Yeah. But is it this isn't merged yet though? Before we do that, we want to merge this, right?
This is merged. Everything that I showed you, it's merged. The only thing that I showed you with the local development cluster is because the last pull request where you not test infra, perf tests. So I did 4 days ago a PR that updated the perf dash to a newer version. So that needs to be deployed. I reached out to the guys in the SIG infra, and we need to trigger a job. Let me find it. This one. So we need to trigger this job so we can deploy the latest version of perf dashboard, but I don't have privileges and permissions to do that.
Okay, cool.
So after this job is triggered, we should see the results here.
Then you'll see all that.
Yeah, we should see here the CAPC.
Yeah.
And also, there were some issues with getting the orphan processes and network port allocations because Windows Exporter does not have those metrics. So we would need to submit some PRs on the Windows Exporter project to add this. Because currently they are, where is it? I messed up all these tabs. It's here in package, measurement, common, and SLOs. So this is the metrics that we collect. So for example, the open file handles and some node storage and port allocations we do not have. So for the network, we queried the Windows net bytes total. We don't have any metric for the open ports, and there is one more query that it's not as desired. But the framework is pretty much done. We can add new measurements here, or we can create new measurements in the Windows portal and then add them here. Also, if we want to add more tests, we can do that here. And there is a pretty good description in Cluster Loader. I don't know exactly where, explaining how to add more tests. And you can like do some tests and then trigger the measurements right after that, and so on. So
Okay.
To show what I mean. So you have here the measurements and the steps and the phases that are performed. So you can do some measurements before the tests, and then you do some measurements after the tests, and so on. But this is the default tests that are run on Windows nodes. I didn't do much work on this file.
Great. Thank you for demoing this and doing all the work. If anybody has any questions or would like to help out with adding more tests or anything, just reach out in SIG Windows Slack, and we can help get you moving in the right direction. Cool. I think that was the one thing we had on the agenda. Is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up or discuss?
We do have, I don't know if I brought this up last week, but we have the KPNG kubeproxy Windows stuff. Dimitri has a PR, is able to make services and stuff. And I got to take a look at his branch, but we didn't merge his branch into my branch yet. But I feel like once we do that, we're going to be able to merge that. And then the final step is we're looking for people to sort of help us to own the Windows kubeproxy on the kernel space. And so I think if anybody wants to sort of help own that project, just in general, the kubeproxy kernel space next generation on Windows, just reach out, because we, obviously Dimitri will be an owner, and I think Amin probably will. But if other folks want to help maintain it, that would be great, because we're going to try to, we're proposing in the KEP that we're going to split all the different kubeproxy backends into separate Kubernetes -SIGs repositories. I don't know if I've already given that update or not, but so.
Yeah, that second part is new. So
okay, yeah.
Because there's a core component and then another component that communicates over gRPC, you can break that part out and it's separate ownership, like a separate repository and everything. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. And we just updated the KEP about a week ago with it's following the new template and everything. So if folks want to sort of chime in on the Windows specific parts, or approve the Windows specific parts, that would be great. I'll add it to the Zoom call chat. So Rajas literally just pushed that last week. So yeah. And I know people are tracking a million things. So if folks need a reminder of how all this stuff works, you can always ping me in Slack and I'm happy to hop on a call for 10 or 15 minutes and walk through it with you.
And maybe once that PR is a little bit further along, can we get a demo of it working and
Yeah.
see what that looks like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can do it next week. So yeah. No, definitely. But I want to give Dimitri a chance in case he wants to. I don't want to steal his thunder because he's the one that added the recent fixes to make it so that it actually proxied services properly. So yeah.
That'd be cool.
But if he's feeling shy, I'll do it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. Any other updates or things we should talk about?
I have a small question. So I've been looking through a couple of repos, and apparently we do have some. We have the SIG Windows tools. We have the kubeadm kubecluster PowerShell script. Is that still being used? Because it looks quite a bit outdated at this point. Still referencing Docker and so on for Windows nodes, which and also doesn't have any sort of documentation. Plus, it refers to a kubecluster.json, which I'm not exactly sure where to get that file from. If you
Yeah,
have any ideas.
So we just merged some changes to the kubeadm docs as part of the whole Windows docs restructuring. And in those docs, one of the things that was there for Windows was this kind of tutorial on how to use Flannel and how to do everything very specifically. It was a hands-on tutorial type of thing. And in the last, I think, release or the release before that, Kubernetes docs moved away from doing specific tutorials on CNIs and things like that. And so the Linux docs had removed all of that information and pushed them to docs like the Flannel docs or the CNI or Calico docs or whatever CNI third-party CNIs might be there. And so we did the same because that information should be in the docs according to a policy that is new. And so kubeadm, we identified that it works just the same. In fact, you don't even need to pass any extra parameters in 125 or 124, I forget which one. And so the docs no longer call anything out other than kind of point you in the right direction for upgrading nodes and things like that. And so the docs for the Docker stuff is kind of gonna age off over time. And so I don't think we're gonna put any energy into fixing those up unless somebody really wants to. It was using like Wins and Docker and that the NAT network that Docker creates or kind of works around. And so I don't think it's something that we'd want to continue moving forward and teaching. And so I think over time, we're hoping that more CNIs like Calico just released their documentation on how to set up host process containers. And so we can point folks to those and using those docs.
Okay.
There's a lot of challenges with the way that those the Docker kubeadm scripts all kind of worked together. Any other questions or comments? Looks like someone asked, is there a Windows sizing guide? Minimum configuration on worker nodes, and Jay answered.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just seeing if, any performance, studies have been done, any scale studies have been done, any, sizing guides, that may be out there for saying, minimum configuration that's needed to run these type of workloads, anything around scale, performance test and sizing, any publicly available information, would really appreciate it.
Brandon, do we know if we publish anything like that? We just did the demo on the perf dashboard, so that will be published, and potentially you can add more information to those and new tests and things. So and start to help us figure out what that actually looks like longer term.
Cool.
I have some rough numbers I can share if you give me a second.
Sure.
That are not like official, but let me
Yeah, and Luther points out the disk. I think you have to make sure that disk has got enough to be able to pull down all the various base images, which can stack up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we have something like this, for the Linux side, right? Like, n number of nodes, n x number of, pods per node, total number of pods. So just seeing, any, studies have been done, similar for the Windows side of the house.
Yeah, not officially like that. And the work that Marius just showed off would potentially enable that by being able to create those types of tests that would be able to run and do the scaling and things. But as of right now, not in the community like this.
Okay.
We're looking for help.
I can share something that I have that's not public, it's not official, but I can at least share it and we can look at it together. I haven't looked at it in a while, but
sure,
if this is useful, let me see here. Let me make sure I share the right screen so I don't get in trouble. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, I'll make this full screen. Yeah, here we go. Okay, here we go. Share. Yeah, so when we were running these with Antria, right? I remember let's see. When it came to networking bandwidth, the interesting thing is we found that the performance was better than we kind of thought it would be. I mean, Windows to Windows is about the same as Linux to Linux.
Mm-hmm.
And then we found that, we found that Linux was overall like four times faster, it looks like, once we started like distributing pods. And then we found that if you look at services, it would take us about almost 10 times, 42 seconds is about a minute. So it's like 4 times longer to density to pack 50 services onto a node and have them reachable over cluster IP, 50 pods behind a service. So I thought that was kind of an interesting one, which is that like once you start trying to pack nodes really densely, things take longer and longer on the Windows nodes for us. And then creation and deletion winds up taking a factor longer, looks like 2x longer. So my experience with these performance tests when we ran them the first time was that like what you see on Windows is that like packing things densely is where you run into issues. And it's not so much that it doesn't work, but it just takes a while to get there. And it might take more resources. But it was overall, you know, like there was nothing that was an order of magnitude worse than Linux. So I was pretty happy about that, you know, because everybody talks about how great Linux is all the time, but it's not 10 times faster, right? Like it's not 10 times. So that's the overall takeaway that I had was you can't remember these numbers, but if you're at a bar talking to somebody about it, it's like, well, it's 2 times slower, like 2 times more resources, 2 times slower. That's kind of the way I remember it all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you run any tests on seeing how many like nodes you could pack in a cluster? Like, you know, start with one and then start scaling it up to, I don't know, 2, 5, 10, 100. Did you kind of see how far?
No, we didn't do that kind of scalability testing.
Okay.
But I don't think you run into so many issues with that because I think that the where you run into issues, where you see issues, at least where we saw issues typically is when an individual node is being packed densely. That's where we always saw everything.
Yeah, so we're actually working on measuring this, and we have a bunch of fixes that hopefully within the next year, like features within the next year that should improve the density of these containers a lot. But if you could send me this data, that would be awesome. Or is it publicly available?
It's definitely not publicly available, and I probably shouldn't have shared it. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. Just ping me on Slack, and I can talk you through it anytime. And there's no reason it can't be publicly available. We just, you know, it's one of those things that's in our internal Confluence. You know,
It was the perf tests or anything. Was it run from any like upstream repository or anything, or that people could potentially use or not?
The iPerf ones we ran upstream iPerf for that because I think we had to make a fix to upstream so that it ran the Windows iPerf. But I think that's the only one that was upstream. They're kind of manual experiments.
Yeah, it's these types of things that we'd like to potentially codify inside that perf and cluster loader so that we could have these things and measure them and see improvements as we improve various things. So
yeah, even if you just describe what you're doing, then we can repro it and make it, you know, publicly.
Okay, I will make an issue of what we did because so I just kind of defined these tests of what I wanted to measure when we released Tanzu on Windows, and Hung Sheng did these tests, one of our engineers internally, and he ran them and he made the tables, and then I looked at the tables just to see if anything was totally broken. That's how we did this. So what we could do is just make a generic spec for that, and then we could. None of these tests are hard to run, right? These are all total. They're already in the code in upstream, right? We just need to copy paste things around and format them into some structured format. So yeah.
Cool.
You can hold me accountable to make an issue that has this, and just ping me, Brendan. We can talk about it sometime this week.
That's good.
Yeah, I have run into several customers, the last several weeks who've been asking for these scale out tests, right? Like the number of pods, per node, the number of nodes per cluster, and, at what point does it typically break? For instance, the Linux, like I said, has, I think, certification for 5,000 nodes per se, per cluster. So, what are is it, in the 50s, is it in the 500s, is it in the 5,000? So customers want some benchmark to go off of, as they start migrating, applications into, Windows.
Yeah, I actually have to drop right now, but again, reach out to me in SIG Windows Slack. We can chat more later today. I'll be around.
Cool. Thanks, Jay.
All right. Yeah, we're a few minutes over now. So we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.